Hi there, my name is Rossie Stone and I'm the director and founder of Dekko Comics, which is basically something that takes school curriculum information, the stuff that your children will be learning at school in Key Stage 2, so late primary, early secondary, and turning that information into comic strips. So effectively just making it nice and easy for them to learn, particularly if your child has anything with like dyslexia or finds it difficult to concentrate. We color code anything that is information based and leave what is just character dialogue black and white, and we also put the footnotes at the bottom so that it's nice and easy for them to remember and relate back to what they've learned in that comic. And effectively what it's doing is it's trying to be a comic before education. Is focusing on entertainment so that the child is entertained before they before they even notice that they're being educated at the same time. And so where does this all come from? Well, imagine a world where a kid can be learning as easily as watching their favorite TV show or playing their favorite computer game. Imagine if learning in any context of school was as fun as that and as easy as that for a child. For example, with a computer game, the kid doesn't know all the buttons and moves in the computer game when they've just started, but by the end of it, they're defeating the final boss, they know all the challenges, they know all the special moves and stuff, and they haven't questioned it at all. They've wanted to learn more about the game, they've wanted to get better at it. And it's the same with the comic. They want to find out what happens in the story. They're intrigued by these characters. They want to, when they see the front cover, the vibrant front covers of them, and they want to see what these characters will be up to and what kind of action they'll be doing. And so when you get these characters to talk about maths, or to have a story that involves an English lesson or something, like it tells you at the back of the comic, then that's where you get something effective. That's where you communicate education through entertainment. And they don't always do that in school. In fact, they don't do it nearly enough. A lot of the information, you could say the majority of the information in school, is portrayed through words and PowerPoints and teachers reading from notes, sort of a lecture or something. In other words, relying very heavily on the skills of reading, writing and listening. And not all pupils are born with that. And some pupils will struggle with that, and some pupils will just be bored with that. I was one of those pupils. I was a kid who really struggled with learning. I just found any academic subject. I was good at art, I was good at acting, I was good at creative writing, I was good at anything that required a non-conventional approach. But things that required that skill, that ability to read and digest the notes, I found it so difficult. I would get to the end of a paragraph and I'd realised I hadn't actually absorbed what I'd just been reading. And it's why I would find it so difficult, and it's why I would find it so boring to try and read a novel or try and read a worksheet or try and understand a textbook and try and keep my concentration in class. And it was why I was at the bottom of math classes all the time. My self-esteem suffered. I thought I was stupid. The system I was in and how badly I was doing at it made me feel I was stupid, because everything was marked on how well you were doing at these academic exams. And I found that it was I basically found that I didn't have a very good relationship with school. I didn't want to come into school. I didn't have a very good relationship with my school subjects. Later on in school, I started getting a hard time from all the other pupils because I wasn't able to show that I was very bright around them either, because of how badly I was doing at these subjects. So it wasn't until I got to my final year of my exams, where things started changing, because exam revision all through my school career had been a really painful experience. I'd try my hardest to absorb this information. My parents neglected their own work to come and help me with revision. I'd be revising longer than any of my friends, and still for a very poor grade. If I was lucky, I would scrape a B, but usually I'd still be getting fails or low grades like C's. And it wasn't worth it for all the trauma I was putting myself through. The worst thing was that I found out that I was dyslexic back in primary 7, but the extra time wasn't helping. The reader and scribe wasn't enough. The techniques I was using for myself weren't helping. Some of them were ridiculous. One involved me like bouncing on a board and putting a beanbag on my head, and that was supposed to apparently help my cerebellum coordination, and that didn't help, much to the amusement of my family. But I even tried mind maps, and they became a mind mess because I just couldn't. The technique of trying to write down the right notes just came back to the skill of reading and holding your concentration again. So my final year of exams, I was fed up of all that unrewarding revision period, and I just picked up a sheet of my modern studies revision notes and thought, you know what, I can turn this into a comic, because I like comics, I like reading comics, I like making comics. I'd always loved reading the Beano and the Dandy when I was younger, so I thought, if I'm going to fail anyway, I might as well enjoy it. So I turned my revision notes into comic strips, and I found out that these were actually fun to make, but weirdly they were even more fun to read. I found that I could absorb the information this way, I could understand it when it's presented to me with visuals and with a storyline and humour and, you know, things that I never had any problem with engaging with before. And the fact is that this comic was trying to be entertaining, this comic was trying to be visually appealing. I wanted it to be so, partly for me, and also so it was good enough that I wouldn't be ashamed if anyone saw me doing it over my shoulder at home. And this was a revelation to me. I'd basically found a way to make revision fun, and that was enough for me. No one had ever told me this was an okay way to revise, but it felt natural to me. It felt natural to my mindset, it felt honest to myself, and it felt like I was learning all this stuff. So when it came to my exams, I thought I was going to fail, and I didn't care. I didn't care because it was the way that it was doing it in the way that everyone had always said I was good at, everyone had always said was my talent, and it had always been the way that felt naturally good to me anyway. But the strange thing is that I got an A in that exam. That was the first grade A I'd ever gotten in any academic exam, and it's because I found out that the information was presented to me in a way that made more sense to me, in a way that was more natural to me. And we have a philosophy that I basically build Dekko Comics on, which is that learning is never boring, but how it is presented can be. I found out that it's more to do with these worksheets, these bland PowerPoints, and all these things that rely on the skill of reading, writing, and learning. That is what I really struggled with. Those are the things that I found difficult. Whereas things like things like pictures and things like acting and things that required my creativity or just my natural enthusiasm to do, those were no problem at all. So I basically went and did my studying at university. I did a year as an art teacher, and all that while I was keeping in the back of my mind this technique. This could really help people. This could help people like me. If this could help just 10 people like me, making a real positive difference in their life and helping them realize that they don't need to feel bad about themselves. They're not stupid. They're just because their mind works in a different way doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them, and doesn't mean that they can excel and find maths, science, or any topic interesting. I mean, the fact that when I left school, all these topics started to become interesting to me when I started approaching them in my own way and out of my own interest was proof enough of that to me. So I went ahead and we made Dekko Comics. And we made it into, we took all the factors of my exam revision experience into account. So from the very front cover, we wanted to make sure that kids saw entertainment before they saw education. They saw fun. They saw something that promised them wackiness and a good time and light humour and all these things. And we tested it on 5 different schools in Glasgow to begin with, if I'm not in Glasgow, across Scotland. And we tested it on 3 different factors: engagement, digestibility, and clarity. And, in terms of engagement, that was how much they enjoyed the comic. The kids all enjoyed it. All the feedback we got was that they loved it, they wanted to see more of these, they thought this was a really fun way to learn, they'd think this would be a huge luck if they could have this instead of homework, or they could put this in their bag instead of a textbook. And we tested these comics on a variety of pupils, a variety of kids, some with dyslexia, some with autism, some with no problem at all, some who were just bored with their current education or just couldn't engage with it, and all of them naturally seemed to love this and said, we want more. With digestibility, how much information they actually retained, how much information they digested, we tested it on, we basically allowed them to take these comics, these prototype comics we had at the time, back home with them. And I said that when you come back in a week, I'm going to come back to your school and test you on what you've learned from these comics. And I just want you to read the comic as many or as few times as you like, but you just need to be honest about when you come back, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong way to do this. So they did, and before they started answering the questions I was asking them on the comics, I got them to put in the top right corner of their page how many times they'd read the comics. And the funny thing was, when I was marking this later, or the interesting thing rather, is that the kids who'd read the comics once or twice, they can remember some of the questions correctly, but not all of them. The kids who'd read the comics 3 or 4 times or 5 times, they could remember most, if not all, of the information correctly. You know, the kids who'd read it once a day or once every couple of days. And that to me proved that it can be for all kinds of pupils, because it was all kinds of pupils who were excelling at this. It wasn't just the high flyers, it was the dyslexic ones and the ones who struggled and the ones that the teachers previously thought were a lost cause. They were doing well at this, and the ones who chose to read it a lot of times. It proved to me that it could be used as a revision material if they wanted to, or it could just be used as entertainment. And that's the thing. And for clarity, we deliberately made one comic about advanced higher biology. We were sneaky, and the kids reacted and enjoyed that as much as all the other comics. But 2 months, you know, and when I say clarity, I mean how easy the information was to understand in the comic format. And 2 months later, when I was having a meeting with one of the teachers of that school, the teacher basically asked their pupils, so what did you actually learn from that comic that you were reading a couple of months ago? And these pupils were saying, oh, we learned all these things, you know, and they said they were great, and they started telling their teacher what chloroplasts were, what photosynthesis was, what animal and plant cells were, all these things of advanced higher biology that of course they wouldn't understand in the context of advanced higher biology, but they understood in the context of the comics. And so that was really exciting to us. So, is it?
Yeah, we've got a question from Bex. She asks, what age are the comics for?
Great question, Bex, thank you. The age for the comics are, like I said, sort of late primary, early secondary school. So I'd say ages 9 to 12 is the best age. But we have tested them on a variety of ages. And so I'd say, you know, I would even stretch that to 8 to 14. In terms of the amount of kids who have enjoyed it, and we've even had younger kids enjoy it, but in terms of where the information is most relevant and where it's best used and enjoyed, 9 to 12 I'd say was the best ages. Is there another question?
Yeah, Dave asks, are the comics more for use at home or at school during lessons?
So are they more for
use at home or in school during lessons?
They are more useful. It all depends how they're used. I think they can be. We've had schools use them in different ways. For example, some schools use them as library materials. Some kids use them as learning supplements in their class. Some teachers actually get the class to read through them together. And we get all variety of good responses from that. And in terms of home, I haven't had any. Actually, yes, some parents read it with their kids before they go to bed. Some just give it to their kids to read for fun, you know. So I really think it's for both. It really can be used in both scenarios. This really is a product for the parents and for the school. It really just depends how you want to use it with your child or with your people. And is there any more questions?
No, that's it.
Oh, that's fine. So yeah, to wrap it up, I mean, nearly 20% of the UK population is dyslexic, and you know, there's even more with all range of learning support needs and such. And I don't think the education system was ever catered towards all these different kinds of thinking. There's so many people out there who aren't stupid, but are made to feel stupid based on how they're naturally wired in the school system, which is quite narrow in how it judges whether its pupils are smart or not. So something like this, which doesn't just try and make reading a bit easier, because the comic format just is getting more and more proven, such as with Paul Alexo, a professor of Sheffield Hallam University. He's been studying comic communication for 20 years, and he's finding that comics in general, based on the panels, only having concise information in each panel is really helpful, and having it as a story and as a sequence is very helpful. So there's that element too, but what we're trying to do with Deco is that we actually try and make it just solidly entertaining, and that is... And trying to make it something that is fun, not as just pretending to be fun, not that's trying to be a more fun way of taking you to school, but something that is fun, that the kids will want to pick it up and read it for fun, which is the reactions we've been having from kids to this day. So that's what we try and do with Deco, and that's something that not only gives kids something that can utilize their abilities more and break down the motivational barrier, but actually get them to enjoy and connect with their love of that subject a lot more naturally and a lot more effectively.
We've had one more comment. What makes them good for students with dyslexia or other learning disabilities?
What makes them good in particular is partly it's the technique that we've thrown in there. You know how in mind maps they encourage you to color code? Well, we've actually color coded the information part so it's clear what is educational and left what is character dialogue, just black and white. Also, the notes that we leave at the bottom of the page, which basically are the key notes of what's covered in each lesson, that makes it helpful for kids who don't always find it naturally to pick up information as they read. And also the fact that it's a comic, that it makes all the information concise and easy to understand in each panel, but also the fact that you've got a visual and a point of narrative to remember it by. That dyslexic kid who struggles with reading no longer needs to rely on their skill of reading to remember the information. They now can remember it by the story and the visuals and their relationship with how much they enjoyed that story. And that's why it's effective for different kinds of learning difficulty, dyslexia, autism, ADHD and stuff like that. Anything where distractions are getting in the way in that person's head, or where the struggles with that skill makes it difficult for them to keep up, that's where just using entertainment as a communicator really brings it out. Because like these people, I don't see learning disabilities, as you call them, I don't see dyslexia as a learning disability. I think it's a disability in the school system, the way it's been structured, but I think it's just a different way of learning. I would say the same for autism too. Generally speaking, just that it can be, that there is way that using entertainment, things that people with dyslexia or autism have no problem with relating with. You can get the worst person at the maths class or the best person of the maths class, and both of them can know everything there is to know about the same piece of music or the same TV show, and something that is based on entertainment, and they will both know everything there is to know about that, and there is no barrier between them in terms of their learning abilities, because they don't need to be good at reading or all the school stuff in order to enjoy the same entertainment material. And so that's why we turned Deco into entertainment. Over. Thank you very much.